What big names do we got to keep on our radar for Michigan State football recruiting? Well, Alan Trieu of 24/7 Sports joins us for that call. But first, Xavier Booker, to the surprise of not a lot of people, he's in the portal.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode of Locked On Spartans is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you all so much for tuning in to Locked On Spartans. It's your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe. Comment below your thoughts on the transfer portal activity for your basketball Spartans. That's where we're going to start this show. Talk about Xavier Booker, who entered his name Tuesday afternoon. And then after, guys, you already know who he is, Alan Trieu. Just football recruiting godfather of the Midwest region of 24/7 Sports. He joins us to talk Gregory Patrick, what other in-state kids to keep our eye on, 2027 look ahead to. So that'll be segments 2 and 3. But let's keep it on the hardwood for segment 1, because as shocking and stunning as the Trey Holloman news was yesterday, like if that was a 9 out of 10, the opposite pretty much happened here. Xavier Booker, after 2 years in East Lansing, he is entering the transfer portal, and the best way to sum it up is I'm just bummed for all parties involved. Of course, it felt inevitable. Feels like the right move for both Booker and Michigan State. A fresh start can only do good things for this gentleman right here. But, yeah, I already know how it's going to turn into. It already has turned into this. The whole, Izzo can't produce lottery picks talking point from rival fans, which, like, I wonder if we're going to hear that same thing when Jace Richardson hears his name in the top 20 in a few months. But anyway, it's either going to go that way or it's going to be, this is a big indictment on the kid himself, Xavier Booker. How could he be such a failure here in East Lansing? And that's unfortunate when, that's going to be the dialogue, because, well, it seems inevitable that when a McDonald's All-American comes to a school and things do not work out the way everyone hoped they would, someone's got to be to blame for it. And of course, like, I wanted things to be better here. So as you see this former 5-star, former top 5 kid end his sophomore season with a bunch of DNPs, coach's decision in the NCAA tournament, someone has to be at fault here, right? I mean, God, this is it. This is a stupid conversation. This sucks. Like, it just didn't work out, but of course it can't be that easy. He did come here as a 5-star, of course, as many of us know. That is like the whole headline here. Former 5-star leaves Michigan State. And he came here and was rated at 5 stars because he had potential. He had length. He had a really good shooting form. He was a very fluid athlete. But we also, right here on this show, also cautioned people very early on that this could be a work in progress. Now, I'm not going to go out and say that, we saw this coming, that it wouldn't work here in 2 years' time in Michigan State's program. No. We said the first year might be a little rocky. Year 2, he's going to blossom. It's going to click for him, but of course, that part didn't happen. So, granted, like we thought that it would be kind of a bumpy trajectory here to start his college career. Really did not think it would happen this way sophomore year. But it did, because, well, in order to play for Tom Izzo, you have to be defensively sound, right? I mean, I don't, not to like talk bad about the kid. I mean, again, I think he's got a good career ahead of him. I wish nothing for the best. You heard a lot of things about work ethic for some other kids in years past. Xavier Booker is not one of these kids. So before we start saying things and breaking down his game, let it be known this isn't out of like, he was just a lazy kid. He didn't try hard enough. No, from what I know, from the people I've talked to, not the case with Mr. Booker here. But yeah, defensively, you got to be a strong player to play for Tom Izzo, to get on the court. Whether you are a 5-star, whether you're a 3-star, whether you're a freshman, whether you're a senior, you got to play defense. And getting backdoored at the clip that he did, I probably didn't sit well with Tom Izzo. Also, the rebounding, I left a lot to be desired, especially for someone that was his build. And I get that he wants to play like a shooter. That is also, just like we said, a reason he was rated 5 stars, because of his shooting form, his shooting ability. Eventually, though, when you're a 27% career shooter from 3, I'm going to need to see you take more drives to the rim, more 2-point field goal attempts, than 3-point field goal attempts. I'm sure, of course, it was by design that, hey, he had to stretch the floor. That's one of the benefits of Xavier Booker. But eventually, I'm sorry to boil it down to something so simple as this. Eventually, I want my 6'11" guy, if he's shooting 27% from three, to maybe get inside a little more, to maybe show that athleticism around the post, get into the paint with his dribbling ability. But whatever, I'm sure that's not the only reason as to why it didn't work out at the end, but I can only assume that is why things weren't working out and why he wasn't getting so many minutes to end the year. And also, on top of all this, like, it's not like next year he had a clear path at a starting role next season. I mean, you suspect that Cooper's going to be the 5. Booker was never really a true center to begin with, and Kohler at the 4. Booker's probably coming off the bench in his junior year. Does he really want to do that? Not just even as a former McDonald's All-American, not even as a former 5-star, but how about just as a junior playing basketball? Like, do you really want to spend 3 years at one place still coming off the bench, or are you better off seeking greener pastures, playing under a different system, maybe one that's a little more freeing and one that allows you to thrive a little bit more offensively despite some lapses otherwise on the court? Yeah, I think it only makes sense for a fresh start here for both Michigan State and Xavier Booker. Look, I've said this point many times on the show here, and this is the last time I'll say it because he's no longer on Michigan State's team, but I think one thing that was detrimental to him is that seemingly overnight moment where he went a guy that was ranked in the 80s or something like that. I think he was like 86th or 87th, all of a sudden to top 5. And then eventually the number 1 overall kid in the class for a hot second before he slid back down. I think it was just inside the top 15. But, I mean, look, does it change anything that happened on the court? No, of course not. But, like, I think it does change the perception of both him, perhaps his confidence, and the perception of Michigan State because, hey, if he was always like this kid that was known to be a project in the 80s, a guy that was just on the inside of being a 4-star kid, like, I think cooler heads would have had different opinions on how this whole thing played out. I'm sure, you know what, if he just came here as a 4-star, maybe between the ears, he's thinking, okay, well, there's not a lot of pressure on me. This is fine. Now that you've added all that, being a burger boy, McDonald's All-American, being a 5-star kid, being at one point the number 1 overall recruit, I can't imagine that did any favors. So, we're not going to say he didn't deserve the 5-star ranking, of course, but, man, whoever does the rankings really jumped the gun there at, what he was already built as versus, what the potential is. And they leaned really hard on the potential, and unfortunately, as of now, struck out. I hope nothing for the best for Xavier Booker. I truly think that he does great at his next spot. I hope he does great at his next spot, but, yeah, it just did not work here clearly. Now, that brings up to 3 guys leaving the Michigan State basketball program. Of course, added on to Gary Norman, Trey Holloman. So, yeah, and then I know that the door's open for all these guys to come back. They haven't technically, gone to other schools yet. The ink has not dried on other programs or however that works. But let me just say, I don't think anyone that I just named would be coming back here. So there you have it. All right. Fun times in East Lansing. All right, guys, we're going to get to talking about Michigan State football recruiting because it has been some time since we've spent some time on recruiting. So we just dragged the best guy possible out there, Alan Trieu of 24/7 Sports. But first, need to talk everyone's ears off about 5-hour energy. Now, guys, I get it. You know what? As a dad with 2 little kids, it's hard to get over that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, heck, even 6 o'clock hump sometimes. And if you're a father out there, if you're a parent out there, or let's say that you got, other responsibilities, certainly parenthood isn't the only one you could possibly have. Hey, 5-hour energy is going to get you over those humps. Let's say that you're not done watching college basketball just yet. You want to stay up for these Final Four games, but you have had a full Saturday of activities before tip-off. Well, guys, stay up. Get energized with 5-hour energy. And it's just convenient. I mean, you could just throw it in the golf bag like I will be doing this Saturday. You can throw it in your pocket just in case you need to crack one open during yard work. Guys, 5-hour energy is easy to grab and it keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango, and more. You can even build your own 12 or 24 pack delivered right to your door. Need one right now? Grab a 5-hour energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They are everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5-hour energy. The gentleman joining us is so dialed into recruiting. He knows where the player's going to go, where the teams are going to get before either of them even know. Of course, it's Alan Trieu of 24/7 Sports. Alan, let's start with the big fish here because Gregory Patrick, in-state kid, top 250 offensive line prospect. He's a legacy kid. Point blank. Is this Michigan State's to lose right now, even with stiff competition for his services?
I wouldn't say it's Michigan State's to lose. No, you might assume that with a legacy recruit, but he stayed open about this. His dad, to his credit, for being a former Spartan, has not pushed that and said you have to go there. I do think Michigan State is very much in it. It would not be a huge surprise. Obviously, he ended up in Michigan State's class, but I think to call him Michigan State's to lose would be mischaracterizing the situation right now. I do think he's starting to figure it out, but he didn't do a whole lot in the winter. You know, he was playing basketball, wanted to focus on that. It wasn't like he was going on tons of visits. When I talked to him, when I talked to people around him, when I talked to anybody who's dialed in that recruitment, the feeling is he has no idea. I mean, he has an idea of these are the few schools that he's really focused on, which is Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Penn State. But as far as separation between those four schools, I don't think it's recruit speak when he says, I don't really know between those four.
Gotcha. Is there any that is giving the biggest competition to Michigan State, or is it truly like a 25, 25, 25, 25 split right now?
Yeah, I think there's been different times where I think different things. Mm-hmm. I really feel like Notre Dame, for a lot of reasons there, you know, they've done a good job on the O-line. It's not very far away from Portage, even though you cross a state line to get there. It's really Notre Dame is closer to he is than Michigan is. Michigan's done an excellent job there with Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore. So I would say it's those two more. I've always thought of those four. Penn State was probably the school running fourth, but you know, once they get guys on campus, James Franklin and their staff does a really, really good job. So I'm definitely not keeping them out of this. But if you had to ask me which schools are more of a threat to Michigan State, I think Notre Dame and Michigan more so than Penn State right now.
Safe to say that, you know, just to compare it to trophy hunting, which I'm sure is a kosher way to go about this, this is definitely like the biggest target on Michigan State's radar, right? Or is there anyone else that's even out there kind of lurking that could even be bigger than the Gregory Patrick sweepstakes?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely up there. Probably, I would say, yeah, you could make the case for number one. I think because he's a legacy, that adds some pressure of like, we need to get him. Although I think when you've looked in the past at how they've handled legacies, Caden Strayhorn a year ago, you know, it wasn't like Michigan State threw themselves on the table to try to get him into the class just because he's a legacy. So I think they go after the guys that they want to go after. And it's clear to me that Gregory Patrick is a priority for them, with or without where his dad played. But that said, I think from the perception end, and definitely if you ask fans, because it's a legacy recruit, because it's in state, because they've been recruiting him for a while, that one feels like it takes on a heightened sense of importance when I look up and down at their official visit lists and who's coming in. I definitely think Gregory Patrick because of that, and because I do think he's gettable. It's not like a pipe dream kind of recruit.
So obviously they're going after Patrick, who's an offensive lineman. They have Eli Bickle, who's already committed as a lineman. Their other three guys, tight end, quarterback. It's safe to say that tight end was a top priority positional wise. But is there anything outside of offensive lineman, tight end that you think Michigan State is really going to hone in on positionally for this 2026 class?
I've noticed wide receiver as an emphasis. I mean, I think that's a position that they've wanted to bring in some playmakers at. I think you saw that going back to last year's class. And I think when you look at who they've targeted, some of the official visitors they're bringing in, that's a position. Defensive back certainly looks like the secondary is going to be a point of emphasis. You know, you have some new staff coming in with James Adams. He's brought some new guys onto the board. And I think they're casting a wide net. They're getting some guys up for official visits. I mean, I think you're at a situation at Michigan State where the roster needs to be built. Mm-hmm. It needs to be built with guys that this staff wants. And so they're going to emphasize every position. I don't see any position as this is a luxury if we get one here or there. But that said, I think when I look at the offers that have gone out and the guys coming in for official visits, defensive back, wide receiver, those are two other positions that stand out to me.
So let's just, keep it within the state here. Obviously, Gregory Patrick from Portage, but of the other non-committed kids for 2026, what should we have on our radar as Michigan State fans? CJ Sadler, obviously, he's the big shiny one, right? He's the number one kid in the class. He's a great athlete out of Cass Tech. You also have Corey Amakri, no stranger to the program. He's a running back out of Hazlitt. Lincoln Watkins, Port Huron Northern. He's the number 9 kid in this state as a tight end. Isaiah Wright, running back out of Rockwood. Or number 11, Khalif Canty, offensive lineman out of Cass. Anyone that we should really hone in on here, or are we going to strike out on all these kids, Al? Just let us down gently if that's the case.
No, I don't think that's going to be the case. So I would say Amakri and Canty are probably the two that I would focus on the most right there. Canty, it seems to have picked up a lot more recently. He's been on campus. I think that I would guess he'll come back for an official visit, even though that hasn't been set yet. But that seems to be moving in a better direction as far as both sides are concerned. I think for a minute when the staff changed hands, I personally wasn't even sure, how much contact he's having. How much does this staff want him? I think it's been pretty clear lately that he's a top tier kind of guy for Michigan State. Amakri, obviously, for another legacy recruit. He's going to take some other visits. I think there's some other schools that are dangerous there. Pitt, for one. He's looked at Kansas. He's going to go some other places, but he's right there. They've built a good relationship with him, and I think he's become, one of the backs that they've really honed in on as a priority as well. So those two, and then I would add a guy who's committed elsewhere in Marcelo Ovidi. Okay. He's committed to Iowa. He's talked about that relationship he's had with James Adams since before he got to Michigan State. That's helped them kind of pick things back up. He hasn't been to campus. I think he has tremendous respect for Iowa, and, Phil Parker and what they've done at defensive back speaks for itself. But I do think there's some intrigue on Michigan State. I do think that they're still trying with him. We'll see if he sets an official visit or gets to campus in a little bit, but I would put him as another one to don't take him off the radar just yet.
Not to dig in, to his whole medical history and have you rummage through his medical files here, but Amakri did have that big leg injury very recently. Has that impacted his recruiting at all, whether it's, via Michigan State, which obviously that doesn't seem to be the case since there's still ongoing conversations, or even outside? Have teams cooled off on him at all, or is it still standard operating procedure for Amakri?
For the most part, I think the thing where it affects him most is that he wasn't able to work out for schools in the winter.
Sure.
And I don't know how much he'll be able to do in the spring. So maybe as far as like adding new schools to the mix, he doesn't as much, as I've kind of discussed different ailments and injuries over the years and recently, a broken leg is honestly probably preferred to anything structural or ligament wise. So I don't think that it's something that's going to haunt him long term. And, even ACL injuries and stuff like that now are much less affecting on a player long term than they used to be. And so I think with the case, it not being a ligament type injury, I think that there's I haven't heard it brought up as a concern. I did miss one guy in the last one, Jack Janda, another one that we didn't talk about. Sure. He's from in the state. I would expect him to have Michigan State in the final group here. I know he was just out at the Poly Bowl in Hawaii. He had a chance to talk to our West Coast staff out there, and the feeling that they got coming back to me was sounds like Michigan State's very much in the mix there.
FanDuel Sportsbook is America's #1 sportsbook, especially, guys, during this March Madness season. And with March Madness being here, FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. Guys, if you want to bet on this Final Four coming up, I like Houston plus 4.5, and I also like Florida minus 2.5 in this one. If you think that I know what I'm talking about, go ahead, tail that. If you think I'm some bozo, well, guys, FanDuel's right there waiting for you to fade those picks. Well, any way you slice it this Final Four weekend, get your action done with FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, guys, new customers bet $5, and if you win that bet, you get $200 in bonus bets. Again, guys, FanDuel.com. Stay hooked to the college hoops action. So right now, Michigan State's sitting at 4 commits. They're coming off a year where they just snuck in the top 50 nationally. But as we're approaching June eventually, official visit season, everything like that. Is there a discernible difference in how you view recruiting at Michigan State right now? Does it look healthier? Am I just only looking at the good headlines that I see pop up on your website? Or is there actually a tangible difference from last year, you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge difference in terms of just the staff being settled in.
Okay.
And I think the ability to have hosted players for an entire season going into these spring visits, a lot of the time last year, at the springtime, it was, unless they were coming from the West Coast where maybe they had a established relationship already, it was the first time some of those kids were meeting the staff. And in the case of their high school coaches and those things, there was still a process of learning each other and this staff trying to build connections around the Midwest. I think they did a great job of that. And now you lead into it this year where you have guys visiting for spring practices who have already been to a game, who these coaches have already been in their schools to see. You have some established commitments, whereas at this time last year, I don't think you have a Cade Kaufman in the class. Certainly a guy like Eddie Whiting, who kind of came from way off the radar. Guys like that, I don't think they're in this class of this time last year. So I do think it's a lot different. And then you look at the official visitor list. I actually thought they did a good job last year of kind of putting that together pretty quickly without having been in town for very long. But I think when you add to that now an additional year, it just feels like they're a lot more settled in and been able to really focus in on the guys that they want. And because of the established relationships, they've been able to get a lot of kids scheduled for officials. And as I just said, in the case of several of those guys, it won't be their first time on campus.
I've got a potentially dumb question here as it pertains to spring practice, visits, everything like that. Because Michigan State, they said that they're going to cancel their quote-unquote spring game or whatever the open spring showcase is here in East Lansing. One of my takeaways of many was I do wonder what that does to recruiting because the recruits don't get in front of the fans. They don't get the full atmosphere. Am I overblowing that, or is this actually kind of a big deal to cancel your spring game in the eyes of recruits?
When I talk to recruits, these kids are trying to get to spring visits have become so important in the process now that I don't think you can't get to everybody's spring game. These guys are trying to take 10 to 15 visits in some case. Yeah. And so you can't possibly, you have to get to practices in order to do that. And I think that they see that there's benefit in going to practice. So like I said, you've had guys up for games, so you get the atmosphere. It's even a better atmosphere on an actual game day than at the spring game. And then if you come for a practice, then you get some hands-on type time. You get to see how these coaches coach in drills. You get to see how they correct mistakes. You get a lot more of an up-close view of, if I was one of these players, what would my day-to-day look like? How does Coach M, for instance, coach the offensive lineman through drills and technique? You may not get some of that in a game setting, even if it's a spring game. So I actually think that not only is it not going to affect any recruits negatively, I think it's a positive to get guys up for practices. And I think the kids almost kind of prefer seeing a practice at this point.
That's why we have the experts on, people. That's right. Don't take my word for it. I'm just shooting in the dark here on Locked On Spartans. But no, that's good insight. Now let's dream a little bit, Alan, because 2027 target Dakota Garant. Oh God, I'm probably screwing up the kid's name. That's a really good look for us over here. Anyway, top 40 overall kid. He's a top 3 receiver, no matter what recruiting site you look at. Out of Harper Woods, he visits Michigan State unofficially, of course, not too long ago. Alan, is this worth dreaming about when our head hits the pillow every night? Or does MSU have no shot in this one? And this was just a nice little photo op with Jonathan Smith that he took here.
I mean, so the fun dreams are the ones where you're stretching yourself a little bit, right? It's not fun to dream about something that is going to come true. You gotta dare a little bit. And I think with Dakota, the fact that he took the time to come up to campus, the things that he has said afterwards, the thing that his dad has said afterwards, those are all positives. When he first started getting recruited, would I have said Nick Marsh was going to go to Michigan State? Maybe not, probably not. Who knows, right? He had 8 offers by the end of his freshman year or something like that. So you never know. That said, I think it's a long shot. I mean, I think it's a real long shot based on the schools he's looking at and where he's visited. He followed up that visit by going to Ohio State and Michigan.
That's tough.
I think the schools out of state are going to have something to say about it. The Oregons and the USCs and the places like that. Being a wide receiver, he's really taken note of Ohio State. And how can you argue that? And then I think he's got some ties to Michigan. You know, Jacob Oden is his cousin. He's been up to Michigan quite a bit. I believe they were his first offer back in middle school. So he's been out, he's been out to Penn State. So yes, I would tell you, you got to dream big. You got to put yourself out there and prepare to be disappointed sometimes when you set high expectations, but that's part of the fun of following recruiting. That said, I would not, I would not get too ahead of yourselves there, but still good that the guy came by to practice. That's what I think. Yeah.
And it's all that us Michigan State fans want, right? Is, hey, you know what? We'd like the diamonds in the rough of last year's class, but we're lacking like some star power visitors here. So even if, we get a few no's in the mix, at least they're trying for these top flight guys. So that's gotta be.
And now with the portal, who knows? He goes somewhere.
Of course.
Things happen, and you keep a good relationship with him. I think that's as much of this as anything now is getting these guys on campus. So that when they enter the portal, it was interesting how many in-state guys had, like a Josh Thompson went in the portal from Northwestern. And I don't know if he had ever been on a visit to Michigan State from high school, so you get nowadays, I'm like, just get everybody on campus. You got guys transferring from Hillsdale to major schools.
Sure.
If they got a Hillsdale offer, get them on campus. Like, let's go.
Now, last question I got for you, Cade Kaufman, still a 3-star, both in the composite and your guys' just singular rankings. How does it work to get him bumped to a 4-star? Is it a Venmo payment directly to you? Do we got to go up someone higher than you? Like, what does it have to be for Cade to be a 4-star here?
Yeah, you know what? I actually respond negatively to bribery. So whenever
dang it, 2 stars for him now.
Yeah. Try to keep it as honest as possible. No. So when it comes to quarterbacks, first of all, that is a position that's hard. Like in the rankings, you don't want to get those wrong. So I'd say we're very careful about those, and those get discussed very much on a national level. So I give my opinion on Cade, but it gets melded into a bunch of other opinions on guys from other regions, and then our national scouting team figures that out. I think with him, it's just a continued learning of him, and for him, continued proving of himself, because last year was his first year as a high school varsity starter.
Okay.
And in a lot of the cases, we've already ranked out quarterbacks in the 27 class. So if you haven't started by your junior year, you're a little bit behind the 8 ball, but that doesn't mean that can't happen where he rises this year. I think with him, it's just less of a body of work than everybody else. And he's continuing to really get, I just went in the gym and watched him throw in the winter. Yeah. I was going, wow, this looks drastically different. He always could throw the ball. Don't get me wrong. But I thought, like, this looks drastically different and better than it did 6 months ago, 8 months ago. And his high school coaches said, oh, yeah, we see it too. There's a lot of improvement here. So I think in the next couple of weeks, Elite 11 in Ohio is next weekend. We're going to have national staff there. He's going to be throwing side by side. So that's new data point number 1 as we get into this next part of the process. But I think because last year was his first year as a starter, I think we didn't want to jump the gun on Cade until we got a little bit more on him, as opposed to some of these guys where maybe they started since their freshman year. Even we have 3 seasons worth of film to look at.
Right on. Well, Alan, I can't thank you enough for your time again. Like, there's no off season for you. Every season's busy season, and can't thank you enough for chewing up some of your time here with us at Locked On Spartans. Anything you want to plug here before we let you go and enjoy the rest of your week here?
No, I would say we will be out at that Elite 11, and so I'll be there live. So will several of our national staff, and then we have Under Armour in Ohio 2 weeks after that, where I would expect a couple of Spartan commits. Maybe that would be our first good look at Joey Cottle, catching some passes and doing some tight end, where I would love to see that. So, get over to Spartan Tailgate. Stay tuned to my Twitter or X, however you want to call it, and we'll be reporting live from those events here, these spring camps in the next couple weeks.
You got it. And also keep it tuned here, right here, guys. Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white. Until next time, love you all. Go green.